So what?
Good afternoon and welcome to the Senate Committee on Government Operations meeting of Wednesday, March 19th. And we have a few items up today. Before we begin talking with Kyle Harris, I do want to congratulate Senator Larry Hart from Orange District. He reported his first bill on the floor today. I thought he did a great job. I know it's already been suggested the order in which you may want to proceed with your future bill. It's good to get to the meat of it and then say, by the way, the committee heard from ... And then I don't think he gave a vote total either, but that's okay. That's really important, obviously. But you did a great job. We will have, I think our attorney coming in later to suggest a proposed amendment on the floor tomorrow to satisfy what I thought was a legitimate concern raised by Senator Wood. I think we can read that strictly speaking, you could decision or a conclusion that if you had not warned something, you wouldn't be able to go into executive session. So I'm trying to find some middle language there. And anyway, so Larry, thank you very much. Let's go around the room quickly and introduce ourselves, and then we'll talk to Kyle a little bit.
Oh.
Hey, I'm Senator Larry Hart, Orange County, over the hill to the woods. Pleasure. So,
Hi, Allison Parks in the Ranger District.
Brian Collin, representative of Rutland District.
Jillian, Committee Assistant.
Tanya Bielski, Chittenden Central District, and also on the CCD nominating committee.
And I'm Becca White, and I'm from Windsor County.
And just for purposes, you can watch this later on YouTube. Maybe you'd like to introduce the other folks in the room.
Sure. So Kyle Harris for the record, Cannabis Control Board, have a lot of wonderful support here today, starting with my parents who are out visiting their grandchildren for the week. And I thought, hey, would you like to come and see what part of what I do on a daily basis entails? So really happy to have them here.
Where are you here from?
We're from Easton, Maryland.
Oh.
Yeah. And then also the other two CCB board members, Julie Holbert and James Pepper.
Okay. Well, welcome to our little committee, and we'll be taking up your confirmation hearing to the CCB, and let's spend as long as you want, 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes together, and the committee may come up with some questions. And I don't know whether this will make the calendar on Friday. If we get it to the folks upstairs today, it probably would be taken up on Friday. So
that sounds great. Well, I'd be happy to start with a quick story, Senator Collin. Because I remember I moved back to Vermont. So I guess I should start before 2019. I went to Vermont Law School in 2012 and 2015. Graduated with a law degree and a master's in environmental policy. I then left Vermont and did the DC thing for quite some time. I was working in the ag world. Down in DC, reps about 14% of the U.S. corn supply, did a lot of environmental affairs work inside the Beltway. And I remember leaving DC thinking, one of the reasons I wanted to leave DC is I was working on a lot of consequential administrative actions, regulations, and bills that were running through both Congress and administrative agencies, but didn't really feel like I got a lot of sense on what I was doing and the people that I was trying to help, for better or worse. And I was like, I want to move back and do some state level work. And I was working at the Agency of Agriculture. That's where I come to the Cannabis Control Board from. And it's interesting to say that after 4 years on the Cannabis Control Board. But, I grew up on a farm in rural Maryland. And so a lot of that experience really is something I still try to bring to my work. But I remember my first or second week on the job, I was with Anson, Secretary Tebbets, and a couple other folks from the Agency of Agriculture. We were in Addison County doing farm tours, and I was one of the new people on the block. I was driving senators like yourself around in cars around the farms, and I remember spending about an hour in the car with you, one-on-one. I'm not so presumptuous to think that you would remember that.
I don't remember that.
But I thought, how cool. Like, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to leave the Beltway and come and feel like I'm a part of something different. And so I wanted to start by saying that's something that's always resonated with me, how quickly I was able to find myself in these conversations with both operators at the farm, but also, understanding priorities from an agriculture perspective. And so I spent about 2 years at the Agency of Agriculture. I was an ag development specialist. I kind of initially was brought in to do hemp business development. They were really launching the Dairy Business Innovation Center at that point. I ran the ACER grant for Maple for about a year. Then COVID hit, and I was one of the only people with an attorney background at the agency. And so I kind of got put on the COVID FEMA recovery unit for a while. And I didn't, again, think that I would find my way into the cannabis orbit, and here after 4 years and a lot of hard work and an ever-changing job. I'm up for my second reappointment. So,
Senator Clarkson.
How lucky did you graduate from the law school?
2015, and I'm friends with Ward.
Oh, it was fun. Great.
Yeah, he's got that cool. I don't know if he's still there. Is he still in that little apartment right next to the
No.
Woodstock Inn?
Oh, no, he is.
He's on the third floor,
Yeah, the attic.
looking out over the woods,
Attic.
the green. It's great.
It's a great spot.
It's a great spot.
He is a lucky boy. But I want to ask you, when you were in the Agency of Ag, were you there embedded as an assistant attorney general?
I was not. I was in the agriculture development division. So I was
Okay.
kind of like a economic / policy guy, and I was brought in to kind of do emerging issues. That's why the hemp at that point, that was 2019, hemp hadn't busted yet. I was kind of some connective tissue between the Agency of Commerce and Community Develops economic division, and BAFM's ag development division. So I had an office or a desk at both agencies, and I kind of
interesting.
reported had meetings in both kind of divisions all the time to make sure that one didn't forget about the other.
He was in the same time as my attorney was in there. Yeah, Mario Hankerson.
Okay, yeah.
Or-
I think he was on the nominating committee
Yeah.
when we started this whole
Senator White.
create the cannabis thing.
Thank you, Chair. So I really appreciate your service to the Cannabis Control Board.
Sure.
And I don't know kind of you're in an interesting position in and you're not quasi judicial, but you
We are.
quasi judicial. You're not even quasi judicial. You are. And so I guess I don't necessarily want to ask a opinion question because I know that can have implications for decisions that you make. But so with that in mind, I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to the conversations that I've seen in the news around what is and what isn't allowed for advertising when it comes to cannabis businesses. That would be my first question is kind of what's your frame of reference for that and how you're approaching that conversation with those that you regulate and as the regulator.
Sure.
And then my other question would be, it seems like we're kind of hitting the market saturation rate.
Mhm.
At least when I have, yeah. I mean, I love that down in the Upper Valley, we have so many fantastic small businesses, and particularly the equity provisions have been extremely helpful in our area where, I believe the only businesses owned by women of color in our town are also cannabis businesses. So that's a really powerful new business opportunity for that community. So I wonder if you'd speak a little bit to the market saturation and kind of how you think about that as well.
Sure. Let's back up and I can talk quickly about advertising because it's certainly one of the main contentious areas that we as board members hear a lot about. And so our staff typically will look to approve or disapprove an advertising submission. Typically we approve them if they've got the core things that are needed in order to be a good advertising submission. One of the most challenging things about that is no more than 20% of the intended audience can be under the age of 21.
Okay.
It can be really challenging, whether you're a newspaper, whether you're a radio station or some other media, to really understand what your audience is. We found creative ways to get some data that really helps a lot of the folks, both who want to advertise and also newspapers, et cetera,
Yeah.
that want to have advertisements run and gain financially that to give a lot of clarity where we can. Again, our job is to implement the law, and the law is what the law is. So I think we've again, we are in the middle of some legal proceedings as it relates to advertisements, so I don't want to get too much into opinions. But it's something that we try to work with people, even if somebody submits an advertisement that doesn't pass the muster, we typically inform them why. A lot of it's because they forgot to include the warning label or something like that in the advertisement. And so, we're doing the best that we can and implement the law that everybody here has. We give you an answer, but
No, that's a great answer. It's hard for you, I think, to give a specific answer because you are in active situations with your case.
as far as saturation goes, it's a really good question, because I think this is a really interesting market, especially as it relates to how this market looks compared to other markets around the country. And every cannabis market has its own complexities, its own nuances. Was it done through a statutory process? Was it done through a binding ballot initiative? Can you limit the amount of licenses that you're able to give out to anybody who's interested, or is it a free market? There's so many things that go into how each state has developed its own market. I think one of the cool things about the way Vermont structured its enabling legislation was, and one of the things that we take very intentionally to heart at the Cannabis Control Board is, if you come in and you have the minimum qualifications, you can pass a background check, you can pay the fee, which is nominal relative to other cannabis regulatory regimes. We're happy to let you put your shingle out and see how successful you can be. What that does create, though, is this vacuum where you've got a lot of licensees, both from I don't know if you want to talk about specifically retail or if you want to talk more so about cultivation.
Yeah, I was thinking mainly retail.
Yeah, so-
But I guess I don't know the funnel from, and there's also, you can be a farm and be a retail location. You can have a combo license or something. Where
So you can't.
grows in a.
You can vertically integrate, meaning you can hold one cultivation license, you can hold one manufacturing license, you can hold one wholesale license, you can hold one retail license, but what you can't do is franchise. So you can't horizontally stack your licenses. So we're never going to see the 7-Eleven campus in Vermont like you do in other markets. One of the things we've been trying to do for we're going through some regulatory changes right now. We have some proposed rules. Our public comment period just ended. The board is looking through 400 pages of public comment. One of the things that we were given as the authority to do last year was, for the first time, start to think more critically about retail siting, and given the authority to perhaps deny a license if it was in an area that already arguably had too many licenses in that very discrete area. In our proposed rules, we put out a first attempt at figuring out what siting meant. It was geared towards a certain amount of licenses per certain amount of residents in a given town. We got a lot of feedback on that, as you may expect.
Yeah.
And I think what the board is, and there's been some stuff going through the legislative process this year that has kind of tweaked some of the language that we're supposed to look at, thinking more about community versus, municipal boundaries in terms of understanding, my parents own a house in Warren, and there's 2 places in Waitsfield, there's one in Warren. They're kind of a quasi community right around, the tourist attraction that is Sugar Bush or Mad River Glen. Should we be thinking about it in those broader strokes, or is it by town? So I think what we're going to do is kind of hold on to that part of our proposed rules and really think critically about how we can gather more input, think about this in a different way, and look to finalize some rules for retail siting over the next couple of months, while we look to finalize some of our other proposed amendments in our regulatory process a little bit more expeditiously.
Well, thank you for that thoughtful answer. I'll just say one thing out loud in case it ever comes up. White River Junction and along the river area, our businesses, our retail operations, they get a lot of New Hampshire license plates in their parking lot.
Yeah.
And New Hampshire doesn't seem to be moving anywhere quickly on this conversation. So the service area of the customer is far beyond the border of Vermont, at least in our area. So that's just one thing I've got. So thank you for.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. because we also have a higher percentage of quote unquote tourists that make up almost 9% of our state GDP annually versus I think 3% is the national average. And that includes day tourists and overnight tourists. So communities like the one that you represent certainly sees a lot of quote unquote day tourists, but we're trying to figure out ways to understand and capture how we best can, you know, creating things around residents and communities while also making sure we don't forget the tourists that are here.
Thank you for being here. My question is around whether or not there's conversation happening with the CCD about the recommendations for potential expansion of licensure options, things like special event licensure or farmers markets.
Sure.
Or, you know, Amsterdam famously has their coffee shops. Like, is there any conversation about what impact that might have on the sort of saturation of the market?
I think speaking from Kyle, not necessarily the full board, I think we would support having those conversations in various committees of jurisdiction, whether it's the recommendation or moving forward. I think, you know, we would welcome the opportunity to really dig into what would be needed in those events, how they would look, how they would operate, what role we would play in those. Would we need any more resources in order to make sure that they can be run effectively? You know, I think any creativity in the license types that we're authorized to implement will certainly help kind of as release valves for a lot of, whether it's cultivators or retailers or all points in between that are feeling kind of the stress under a really highly regulated industry, perhaps the most highly regulated industry there is in the state.
That makes a lot of sense. My other question is around whether or not there are presently any regulations that are, well, let me backtrack. One of the stated goals of legalization was to help eliminate the illicit market. And I'm wondering if we presently have regulations in place that are making that more challenging than we might have expected.
I think that's a really good question. And I think I'll say again that we just closed public comment on our proposed rules. I think as we've gone from the first iteration of our rules back in 2022, I believe, to now we've opened our rules every single year with the main goal of what's duplicative, what's unnecessary, how can we still meet our statutory obligations and the obligations that an agency like the Cannabis Control Board has with its in relation to, you know, this being a federally illicit Schedule I substance. How can we make sure we can do everything I can to support and promote small businesses while still not setting them up for not necessarily failure, but entanglement in ways that I think are troublesome and so on. So again, we're looking at a lot of public comment. I think we've been really intentional in asking the community, what is duplicative? What do you feel is unnecessary? We've also engaged a consultant recently that's going to help us understand and look at our regulations that has cannabis expertise and has worked in other jurisdictions, what is truly necessary and what can we look to do in a different way. We're going to make the renewal process a little bit more easier, a little bit more streamlined. We've made some adjustments around background checks. So you don't have to do that every single year. There's every couple years that you could do those because those can get costly. And where can we trim around the edges to kind of still find success moving forward, but still maintain the job that we've got to do.
And I guess I wonder if there are any statutory changes that might be helpful in sort of moving us into that sort of next phase of this crazy world of cannabis, as somebody said.
Well, I think we're about to see some of those in bill that's about to be passed.
Excellent.
Yeah, there's a bill moving out of the House. It should arrive in the Senate over the next couple of weeks. I think there's a lot of technical changes in there. Some of the things that we need, especially around winding businesses, unfortunately, down. What happens if a business does leave the market? They still got a lot of product. They haven't been paid for everything that they need to be paid for. Do they have the authority to still collect money or sell product if they don't no longer have a license? A lot of technical stuff like that, but would be happy to have that conversation with you at a later date as well.
That would be great. And then my last question is if there is any anticipation of, given the sort of changing waters at the federal level, if there's any anticipation of challenges or complications and how we're preparing for that.
Sure, and that's a really
I'm not.
It's a really
remembering
hard-
the ones.
One of those things.
That was my question. That's a good question.
Well, you know, after working in DC for 5 years or so, every time I think something that's close to happening, it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I always think of Willy Wonka going down 2 steps and the back 1 step as he's singing.
In the Gene Wilder version.
In the Gene Wilder version, for sure. So, yeah, you know, it looked like things were moving in a certain direction, and then the way the elections in November went, and some recent appointments, to both the DEA and some introduction of some bills at the federal level, I'm not quite sure we're any closer than we were a couple of years ago.
Are we in a worse position though? And is there things that would be protecting Vermonters and protecting just?
I think it's a hard question to answer. I think, on the one hand, Vermont-based businesses being able to sell their product across state lines would mean more opportunities for those businesses up and down the East Coast. People know what a Vermont product is, what the value is behind that product, and you know, they seek these products out. On the flip side of that, it also means that other businesses, larger businesses, more multi-state businesses can't bring their product into Vermont unless the Cannabis Control Board knows about it. So the one license per entity rule really helps kind of safeguard against some of that. I kind of think we're in a boat in rough waters. And I think as those, whether it's interstate compacts and the ability to sell throughout New England or broader, there's things that I think are really great about that. And there's also things that really give me anxiety about, can a small state, and I used to work in commodity markets, like you can grow all the cannabis that's needed to supply the entire country on a couple fields in Kansas or Indiana. How do you safeguard a small state that values craft and quality over the commoditization and rough to the bottom? So it's a tough question to answer. I think there's benefits and drawbacks to where cannabis is in the federal landscape conversation. Our job and what we're attempting to do by talking to the right people and retaining some consultants who have familiarity with other markets is how can we work and do some strategic planning around what the next 5-10 years looks like for cannabis, based on a variety of different factors and what happens and how quickly that does happen.
So one of the loudest and strongest concerns voiced to me is the whole topic of odor. And I'm sure that came up in a lot of the public discussion, and James and I have talked about this a lot, it seems. And there's one person that I represent that's very strong about the, no pun intended. You know, she lives next to someone that used to only have an indoor facility. Now they have an outdoor one. And I understand that, you know, it grows and at some point it's ready to be harvested. And that is the point at which it apparently has the strongest smell.
Yeah.
And she's constantly asking me, isn't there something you can do? Because she literally can't go outside. She's got a respiratory situation as well. So I'm sure it came up. I just want to make sure that I put that on the record that, and I don't know what the answer is. You know, do you have a 8-mile buffer zone? I don't see how that works either. So I don't know what the answer is, but I just wanted to at least mention it.
That point taken. I wish I had a great answer
Okay.
to solve their problem
Yeah.
and all of our problems. Odor's tricky. Odor's usually
Yeah.
left to the municipalities from a zoning perspective to handle, especially in the more agriculturally oriented context. But I mean, you're right, whether it's a no buffer, 10-foot buffer, 50-foot
Yeah.
buffer, 8-mile buffer, smell is smell, and smell is tough because it means something
Yeah.
different to every single person, you know? So our job is to implement the law, and a lot of what the law states is prioritizing outdoor cultivation, small cultivators, and doing what we can to help those that want to seek licensure. You know, that doesn't always make for friendly neighbor relations. And it's certainly something that we do care about.
So we began late and I see we already have 2 other things that have come into the room that we need to talk about. Yes, very quick.
Just quickly for Larry, and really for Larry, would you just describe your job? Because it is a job. It is not just serving on a board that you get $50 a meeting compensation for.
Sure.
So for Larry, who's new to our committee,
Absolutely.
may not appreciate that you are actually a full-time employee and that, would you just describe your job for
Sure.
all of us?
Full-time employee, appointed by Governor Scott. My job has changed dramatically in the 4 years that myself and my 2 other board members have been in this job. It started as just the 3 of us. We oversee the implementation of the law, and we help write all of the regulations that are looking to implement the law. And we've got a full-time staff that works kind of more on the day-to-day, where kind of the board is more big picture, handles the challenges, the strategic thinking, the policy making for the cannabis community, with a lot of input from a lot of cannabis licensees and advocates and so on and so forth. We've got a full compliance division. We've got a full licensing division. We have a general counsel. We have a data manager. One of the interesting things about cannabis is because of its federal status, the decision was made that this body should be separate from any other state agency because of the federal funding entanglement that is so prevalent amongst all of our state agencies. And so we are an independent board that implements the law. But yes, we are all full-time employees, and we have about 20 people or so working at the board full-time.
In my district, I think there's only 2 cannabis stores, one in Bradford and one in Fairleigh. And the one in Bradford's extremely busy. The one in Fairleigh, you see 3 or 4 cars there.
Yeah.
But the one in Bradford, they're stretched out on Main Street, and they're walking in from all the,
Yeah,
and they're
they're
coming from New Hampshire.
Sure. And it's tough. I think the jobs, it gets back to retail siting. We're balancing business viability. We're balancing customer access points. We're balancing what the cost is to the average consumer, right? In Massachusetts, it's a lot cheaper. People might argue that the quality is different, but there's different priorities that every consumer shops with. So it gets challenging and hard to juggle, but the work is far from done. We'd love to be reappointed if the powers that be so see fit. I don't think again, it's started by saying that the job feels a lot different than it did when I first took the job, when there was only 3 of us, but there's still a lot of work to do at OVF.
And you're still enjoying yourself. That's key.
Yes, very much so. A lot of work to be done to still get to the point where things are fun. As Senator Vyhovsky asked about more of the fun events and farmers markets and all that stuff. I think,
We'll get to that.
Yep.
Senate Economic Development.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I understand it's a confirmation hearing, but what's his name?
Go ahead.
I was just wondering, are we gonna confirm this gentleman today?
Well, I'm waiting for a motion.
I make a motion to confirm this.
Okay.
Okay. Before I would vote yes.
Yeah.
Private parents.
Yeah.
I'm the clerk, so I get the right.
Yeah, we are.
You have to see how quick, nimble, and flexible Vermont is.
We hear from him, we confirm it.
That's okay. In July, I'm headed for Maryland and Virginia to do the Civil War stuff.
Oh, great. Good for you. That's wonderful.
Okay, confirmation.
I would move that we confirm.
Well, we've already got the motion.
Oh, you make a motion.
Senator Hart did.
Work there. I missed that. Okay.
In a second.
Second is not needed. I'll second. Need be, and we're just waiting for Larry to call the roll.
Okay, we will call roll now. Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Hurt, yes. Senator Burkowski.
Yes.
Senator White.
Yes.
And Senator Collins.
Yes.
5-0-0. You just
Okay.
passed the government off.
We'll hopefully have it on the calendar on Friday.
I don't know that this
If
is
anyone-
recorded, but if anyone does, I will do it.
Okay,
It's not, this is not.
I didn't think so.
we don't need to report it. We just say that the Government Operations Committee voted unanimously to recommend that you be reappointed. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you for time today. I know it's valuable. I'm happy to talk more about cannabis whenever anybody wants to
We'll,
talk
we'll
about
see you at
cannabis.
Senate Economic Development very shortly.
We'll see you soon. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
So earlier today on the floor, we had,
Keep them out of trouble.
two of our bills. And Rick Sagel's here with Senator Ron Hinsdale to hopefully give us a friendly amendment. That was the adjective that was used to our S-23 bill, which is the synthetic media bill. So Keisha, welcome. It's great to see you and thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Well, Senior gave me a cookie, so you want some time there. For the record, Senator Keisha Hinsdale, Southeast. In the time we've had to get lunch, I have not written an amendment with Rick. Rick's written an amendment, and perhaps we could just, I think you all get what I was trying to accomplish
Yes.
with ensuring that the provisions aren't tied to the election of an individual if they are maligning any individuals with manipulated synthetic imagery or technology. So let's hear what Rick's got.
Oh,
I had a question.
Oh,
sure.
I think I understand what your point was. And I thought it was kind of covered in the bill, so I assume we'll hear from Rick on it, but can I just give you the example that I thought you might be talking about? And you tell me if it's correct with what you were thinking, which is we had Prop 5, or we had a constitutional amendment
oh, right.
on
Yeah.
reproductive.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't remember what the number was.
Yeah.
On reproductive, on
Mhm.
reproductive
Yeah.
liberty.
Mhm.
And I could see someone maybe putting in an artificially intelligent made image of,
The CEO of Planned Parenthood.
yeah, exactly. Is that what you're describing? It's not that the individuals who are on the ballot, it's even if a topic that is covered by the ballot.
Because that section before is where your intent was strong and I think very well articulated to include anything that would deceive a voter, regardless of whether or not it is manipulation of a particular candidate. That was one of
Yeah.
3 criteria. But that intent doesn't carry over if it only comes into play when a candidate is you have to be within 90 days of a particular candidate being on the ballot to trigger the use of this language.
I think maybe I need,
As opposed to an issue or a.
It based, to my knowledge, and Rick, maybe you can jump in, but there was nothing tying those other elements into when it's triggered, except a candidate being on the ballot within 90 days.
okay, so
So a prop could be on the ballot, a budget.
Right. I think that's what you were.
yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. So it would be that like a candidate, it was like what basically you want issue.
Yes.
If you are using imagery, synthetic imagery to deceive a voter, to deceive voters. The voter deception piece got lost in when this provision can be utilized.
Yeah, so that would be an example.
Mhm.
Okay, that's fine.
And there was the one in the middle,
Yes. So let's see what.
influence an election.
So Rick Sagel, Office of Legislative Counsel, and the senator has not seen my amendment, so we might need to discuss.
Sure.
I think
I was ready for you to say that.
addresses, I first want to show, I think,
Oh.
where the issue may have come up. So in the definition, Senator White does recognize that, these 3 and Senator Collmore on the floor also indicated that, deceptive and fraudulent media includes things that not only injures the reputation of a candidate, but also could influence the election or otherwise deceive a voter, which could include, things that aren't specific to a candidate, right? But then to Senator Ron Hinsdale's point, in the actual disclosure language, it does say shall not within 90 days before an election at which a candidate for office, elective office, will appear on the ballot. So I think there is some confusion there.
Mhm.
So what I've done, stop sharing this document and share my unedited amendment.
The editor.
Unedited. This is going rogue here. So what I did here, and this is just an instance of amendment, it's not a strike all. I'm not changing the definition of synthetic media or deceptive and fraudulent synthetic media. What I'm doing is changing that first portion of the disclosure where that line is.
Mhm.
So current language is in the quotes. You see that. You see on line 11 is where we have the new language put in. So you can see the difference. On the new language, you have a person shall not within 90 days before an election in Vermont publish, communicate, or otherwise distribute synthetic media, and the rest of it.
Oh, you just take out, that's great. I think I understand.
I want to make sure, I see the problem that Senator Romney still brought up on the floor. I think this addresses it, but I want to make sure that she agrees and that you all think this.
Can you blow that up? I can't.
Yeah, we
See it
can
from
see
here.
it.
There you go.
You want to hear the, see
Could
the
you
new
read it?
Yeah. So on the line 11.
Yeah, you just got rid of the candidate.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it would now apply to ballot measures and,
Mhm.
any election in Vermont, right?
yeah, that
Or
makes,
anything that is being voted on.
Any election in Vermont.
It's an election.
Yes.
Right. But
Yes.
any person bond issue
Where people
being
are voting.
elected, being voted on.
That's right.
makes sense to me.
Great. So
Beautiful. You
That is
took out, you took out words. That's great.
We took out, I always love to do that. Yeah. I mean, someone might say on the floor that it feels now too broad, but I do think your three provisions that lead this are, very useful. And if this falls under that, but is less narrow, I think that solves the problem.
I'm a yes on that.
Makes sense to me.
Everybody okay?
And just to be clear, I also, you see the original language, on line 8, should have known as a deceptive and fraudulent synthetic media of a candidate on the ballot. I got rid of that too, because again, your deceptive media may not be about a candidate. It may be about an individual that is related to the issue, that you're digitally altering. So again, I'm opening up what's included here.
And you're comfortable explaining the
Yeah.
proposed amendment from on the floor? So, yeah.
Should we
we're
do a
good.
straw?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
sure. So all those in favor of accepting this as a friendly amendment, raise your hand. It looks like 5-0.
Thank
And
you.
I will report it as such after
Okay.
you have talked about it.
I appreciate
We
that.
don't even need AI to.
That's right. That was.
And I thank you.
Yeah, then thank you, Rick, really.
Sorry enough for AI.
Thank you.
All this
We're using it every day without
I do
doing it.
not want to get involved.
Thank you. Good
That's why I used to, for the
Limited.
presidential.
Yeah.
I found the house.
I used to shut, mute them and then move on.
We have to
I
do
hated
it
going
with
in the
house.
house. You know they were all there.
Well, it's like, it's true, but then it's there at the bottom. All right, thank you. Thanks, committee. So you just are gonna.
Okay, well, we're kind of back. Well, no, we're still a half hour behind, but that's okay. Did Katie McGlynn say that she?
She's in another committee at 2:30.
Ah,
I'm trying to.
well, that's okay. We have another amendment that I'm gonna try to get to Tucker to come in and that was on Larry's bill. And again, Larry, if well, we'll go up here in a second. I just want to explain the process. So let's take a break for, did she indicate how long she might be in the other committee?
I'm trying to see if she can come in later in the afternoon. I think she said she is in 2 different,
Oh,
it might be a little while. if She's available.
well, let's try for a half hour break then, and we'll come back at 3 o'clock, and if need be, we'll try to get Tucker's amendment early in the morning, because we have to take that up. It's third reading on both of